John sighed with tiredness as he turned off his computer. The last of his work was finally done. He looked at the clock and saw that it was well past midnight. He closed his eyes for a moment because he was tired. He had been hunched over papers and figures at his small home office desk for hours, and his body hurt. He worked late every night for weeks on end on the job, which meant that he could finally finish it. In order to have a weekend off, the extra pay would be well worth it. Soon, Sarah would also be back from her conference trip abroad, and the thought of taking it easy with her made him feel a little better. John got up from his desk and walked into the quiet living room, where he looked for a midnight snack before going to bed. The house was dark, except for one lamp that he had left on earlier. It cast long shadows on familiar furniture. John was going through the fridge when he noticed a faint smell, a light floral perfume that was still in the air. It was faint but clear, and it was too strong to be Sarah's scent left over from her departure. John frowned and looked around the room more closely. He quickly noticed that someone else had been there. The TV remote was slightly out of place, and an Afghan throw was straightened on the couch. Some small things had changed from how he had left the living room this morning, which was very clean. John's tired mind curled with anxiety as he thought back on bits and pieces of the past few weeks. Had he made sure the doors were locked every night? It's possible that a cleaner or service person got in by accident, but the perfume wasn't like the other service people I've met. As the puzzle parts started to fit together, his heart rate went up. John quickly went to his office and played the security camera footage on several screens. As he looked for signs of an invasion, hours of dark video flew by on fast forward. Finally, just after a week had passed, he saw movement in the living room, which was very dark. John quickly realized that a hooded figure was clearly curled up on the couch, facing away from the camera lens, as he squinted at the blurry playback. They stayed still and idle all night, as if they were just keeping an eye on the empty house. John was shocked as, over the next few nights, the same person quietly moved through the house, changing small places to fit their presence. It felt like they had fully moved into the house by the end of the week-long recording. Who were they, though? John pulled up the clearest picture he could find of the unknown invader caught on video and zoomed in on features that could be recognized. Long, dark hair came out from under the hood, and even though the face was fuzzy, it was clear that it belonged to a woman. The person in his house wasn't a worker or a burglar. It was a woman who wasn't welcomed. His heart raced as the scary thoughts started to hit him. No one knew about it until now, but someone had carefully watched, planned, and stalked their way into his secret sanctuary. What kind of deep involvement did this person have in his personal life that he didn't even know about until now? What scary goal had they been trying to reach by staying in his house for a week? John grabbed his phone to call 911, but his hands were shaking so badly that he could hardly speak clearly. His anxiety was growing. The cops needed to see this right away and make sure he was safe from whatever had so thoroughly invaded his home without permission or notice. As the call ended, there was still a faint floral smell in the dark, quiet home that didn't have a source or a reason. When John woke up the next morning, the sound of coming police sirens woke him up. He was still wearing the same clothes from the night before when he opened the door and was glad to see that police were already aware of what was going on. As John showed them around the house and pointed out changed areas that had been caught on camera, he felt a little less scared because his fears had been proven. Even though John felt better knowing Sarah was back by his side, the memories of being violated were still very strong in his mind. He had bad dreams about Linda watching him from the dark corners of their house, which kept him from sleeping. Every time the house creaked, they had flashes of her entering their private space for unknown reasons. By day, the loss of boring routines left people with a lot of stress with nowhere good to go. Every little thing became scary. Checking locks became an obsession, and staying away from busy places felt safer. Sarah became worried as John became more distant and refused to talk, but she caught him mumbling to himself over and over again. She was patient because she knew that the trauma had to be dealt with in secret. After a week of not having many quiet times together, though, worries about John's mental health began to grow. After something so upsetting, was this level of unease normal? What could possibly make him feel better about his constant fears coming back into his daily life? Sarah advised taking a scenic drive on the weekend while the windows were open and the wind blew softly. But every new, beautiful place John went to made him more jittery, as if he thought danger could happen anywhere. He looked at scenery like he was planning a way out, but he couldn't find a peaceful view anymore. Going back inside made me feel safer, but it didn't make me feel better either. Hazes stayed, drawing John's attention away with small sounds or smells that woke him up. As security feeds from the suburbs played over and over in his thoughts, old hobbies lost their appeal. No place felt safe from the memories of someone living in their room without their permission. The days went by quickly until John woke up in a cold sweat, screaming because he had been having night terrors about chasing Linda, but never catching her playing hide, and seek behind walls or avoiding notice. Sarah held her lover close as her heart broke to hear such pain that couldn't be soothed. Getting professional help seemed to be the only way to deal with this kind of unease. Even though Sarah promised not to, telling a stranger about the abuse made me feel bad. In his mind, he was afraid of betraying the manly duty to protect his family. But John's mental health got worse without any relief, and he started snapping at small things, which ruined the peace in their relationship. John let down his guard for the first time while doing the dishes with his partner in a rare moment of calm. His voice shook as he talked about his deepest worries. Doubts about his ability to keep his loved ones safe, constant internal monitoring wearing people out, and losing control over his imagined constant invasion of privacy. Sarah heard with kind eyes that showed she understood and cared. No judgment came. Only understanding that they needed help together made them stronger where one was weak on their own. He felt safe when she clasped his hand. There was no danger here. There was only love and trust inside these walls, no matter who was trying to get in. John slowly let go of his worries, knowing that his loving partner was there for him on his healing path. The professional counseling I booked for next week felt like a strong first step toward recovery, not a sign of weakness. Maybe there really was a safe place to go after a terrible event, and it wasn't a wall, but people sharing their lives behind them. Even though it was getting dark again, John held on to the comforts of life, like being hugged by loved ones. But approval quickly turned to shock when the intruder, a messy young woman named Linda who said John was her boyfriend, was caught outside without any struggle. Being away from him made her look really upset, and she begged with tears in her eyes to say that they were deeply in love. John had never seen this woman before, though. As she was carefully led away to be checked out, her screams of pain could be heard down the street, giving people chills. John saw his neighbors looking through the curtains for the first time. Had any of them seen the stranger who had been living in his house without being bothered for a week? At the police station, Linda's things from home were taken as evidence. These included clothes, toiletries, and, most disturbingly, pictures of John that were printed off of social media sites without her knowledge. In her notebooks, she wrote down the exact license plates of all the cars that were on his land at all times, every day for weeks on end. But when I asked her about it, the depth of her fixation became even more disturbing. Linda talked about vivid fantasies of them as a couple, planning their family lives with a strange passion, even though they had never actually talked to each other. She followed him around from afar in secret for months, putting herself on the edges of his world in her crazy thoughts. But how deep did this break? In Go, John was very calm while Linda talked to him lovingly. But John felt disgusted and violated. Behind the illusions were dangers. She had shown she was dangerously good at breaking into his house without being caught. He was afraid of what other parts of himself she might have infected without meaning to. An evaluation by a psychiatrist confirmed Linda's distant view of reality and diagnosed erotomania, a delusional obsession in which the person thinks that someone else, usually a stranger, is deeply in love with them. Not only did she invade privacy, but she also put people in danger because she was unstable. Since Linda was being held for immediate medical care, it was easy to get a restraining order. Over the next few days, John's nerves stayed tense, even though Linda was in a more controlled setting. He couldn't fall asleep because memories of her quiet entrance made the walls around him seem to shrink. Locking the doors and windows every night, which seemed like an easy task, was no longer enough to protect him from this sneaky obsession. His usually calm home now had the shadows of someone else's long-term invasion, without permission. It was impossible for him to get rid of the changes Linda made to his space. She curled up for warmth, cooked illegal meals, and rearranged things to her liking for a week straight. No place felt like a real safe haven from the abuse anymore. Even though she wasn't there physically, her sneaky entry into his private life left a lasting psychological mark. John kept thinking about the shocking news over and over, and his anxiety grew. If she could get in so easily and stay hidden for so long, what else could she infect without him noticing? During those weeks of silent stalking from inside his walls, he felt like his job, relationships, and personal information were all tainted by the thought of talking to Linda. Who else's privacy or safety could she breach if the chance came up again? When Sarah finally called to say she was taking an early flight home because John was upset, he felt both relieved and worried at the same time. His tense jitters would definitely calm down when she was there, but unworthy thoughts of keeping details about the trauma private, keeping her from talking about the violation, and getting away by not fully admitting how deeply his fears still hurt him crept in. Sarah found John exhausted from being on high alert all the time when she got there. He tried to reassure her that the real threat was gone, but she quickly confessed every new detail of the intrusion because she was paranoid. Even though calming words helped ease the fear, there was still a feeling of unease because the safe place they lived now had a disturbed woman's mark on it. As John slowly blinked awake, the sun shone brightly through curtains that weren't closed. He felt temporarily disoriented by the unusual peace that was stirring in his thoughts. When Sarah's fingers were wrapped around his, they felt like they were holding him down. For the first time in weeks, rest softened parts of my face that were rough from constant stress. People still remembered Linda's intrusions, because scars from being violated rarely fade completely. But counseling meetings were healing because they helped people let go of their shame. Accepting that trauma's effects are normal human responses validated feelings and eased loads that were carried alone for too long. Professionally led talks broke down each obsessive thought and looked at it critically instead of giving in to it. Small wins happened every day as bad habits were replaced with good ones, and power that had been taken away by someone else's actions was slowly regained. John felt better after saying he was weak and reclaiming his strengths in the company of others who cared about him. There were still triggers that needed time to heal minds that had been torn apart by hidden privacy breaches. Talking about the case with a loving distance slowly took out the trigger's stingers, letting the wounds heal without getting infected. Normalcy slowly came back together after what used to break it, as John learned how to deal with things mentally instead of dodging them. Though full recovery was still unclear, scars stayed even though they were getting lighter. Living constantly told me that bad memories could come back to haunt me at any time. John and Sarah both talked about whether life went on in the shadows, as long as people stayed where the violation happened, no matter how far away they were from the cause of the violation. It became clear that they had to make a tough choice. Even though the physical threats were gone, the comfort of their suburban home caused them a lot of mental stress. John might have a fresh start if he could get away from the things that were keeping him focused on past attacks and leave those memories behind walls in a different place. New adventures came up that were unknown but not tainted by the abuse I personally experienced. Change caused worries about the unknown, but it also provided a welcome break from the frequent reminders that were holding healing back. Support systems made people more determined as fear lost control over their life paths. John felt strong when he took control of his life by making choices that gave him power, not by reacting out of fear. With the help of his mentor and Sarah's strong hand, John bravely made changes in his life that at first seemed impossible. The house in the suburbs sold quickly because the market was so hot, and the buyers were happy to start a new life without any haunting memories. Their location stayed a secret so that no more problems could get into their healing space. As the moving van with the last few boxes pulled away, I felt like the job was done, but there was still work to do. John looked at his partner and saw understanding in her eyes. They had been through hard times together, but they had made their love stronger by working through them together. As people rebuilt their lives on stronger ground, far from the effects of abuse, new adventures awaited them. John knew that the clouds that lingered in his mind might never go away completely, but facing the future without fear freed his spirit that had been locked up for a long time. Walked off together into the unknown, leaving behind the places where violations had happened, but with scars that showed they had survived. A new leaf fell, and the story went on from there, where hope grew from the ashes of the past.